Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jack H. Brown College of Business and Public Administration, to our conversation on trade and tariffs, myths and maths. My name is Tomas Gomez-Arias. I'm the Dean of the College, and with me is Stella Chu.
Stella Chu, hi, very nice to meet everyone. I'm a professor in the management department. I teach international business and strategy.
Thank you, Stella. And with us is also Marina Camel, who will be reading some of the questions from the audience here and also from those of you who are connecting virtually. And Marina, those of you who are here, there are some cards here. If you have questions, please just write them or just ask for the microphone and we can give it to you. Marina, we can start with the questions that people have. When they're registered, they have an opportunity to ask questions, and they had some.
So the first question is, what are tariffs?
All right, so tariffs are taxes. Whenever a product crosses the border into the United States, there can be a tax on it. It can be a fixed amount of money per unit of the product. In most cases, it's actually a percentage of the value of that product, and whoever imports that product has to pay that tax. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good definition of the tariffs. And I just want to add that the tariffs are just one of the what we call the trade barriers. And you heard of tariffs most because it's very straightforward, but other what we call the barriers include, you heard about the subsidies, government give money to certain industries to help them. Could be cash, could be loan, could be, other type of grant, etc. And also you heard about the quota, like a certain amount of goods you can import and other type of things like a regulation, export licensing. You're not allowed to export or import certain things or to certain companies or to certain countries. Tariffs is one of those, but the most popular ones.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Stella. Marina, what other questions do we have?
What do tariffs do and what is their purpose?
All right, this one is a more complicated question. Stella, do you want to take it?
It is. Thank you, Dr. Gomez-Arias. The purpose of the tariffs could be, obviously, when you make a product more expensive because you have to add a tax on it, and then when they circulate in the market, consumers are less willing to buy. So the purpose of that is you protect those, they don't have tax, they don't have tariffs, which are the domestic industries. So you actually help your domestic industries to attract their consumers. And certainly on the other side, the government, they benefit from that as well. Whenever you collect a tax, the government, they have money, right? So that's something the government, they can, collect tariffs they can use for whatever purpose they want to use. It could be the infrastructure. It could be, you help improve the ports, construction, like protect your border, etc. There are a lot of purposes of that. And there's another theory, which we can also tell is to protect the homeland security, like a certain industries that are so important for the safety of the country, and they have to do something with them, and also protect your consumers. Like you don't want dangerous products being imported and hurt your consumers. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Well, just another general comment. As a tax that they also cause a decline in economic activity, because whatever it is that is being taxed, it becomes more expensive. So there's a trade-off there. There are some benefits in having tariffs. There is a cost to that. And in some cases, that impact is asymmetric, is not uniform. We can have tariffs on a certain industry that benefits that industry, but then it hurts other industries.
Oh, and I want to add that we don't forget about the jobs. That's another very popular justification for why we charge more tariffs nowadays in the US, right? Because what we observe in the market is, like one of the major argument is the jobs are gone. Like they are moving, we talk about overseas, we talk about outsourcing. That is a major concern. And that's why we have we have certain protests, but we have a lot of supports as well.
Is there evidence that tariffs actually create or protect jobs?
That is a very good question, Dr. Gomez-Arias. So I think we talk about both sides of the story, right? So on the one hand, it's a simple math, like when we talk about we protect industries, the companies, they have motivation to manufacture here in the US rather than overseas, right? But it's a matter of how soon. So, like a business is not a one-day deal. You take time and a lot of efforts and trial and error as well, right? So you have to build infrastructure, you have to build facility, you have to train worker, you have to, it happens in years.
Yeah, and while you are protecting one industry, then you're hurting all the other industries in the economy.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's,
absolutely. So if you import those goods not to sell them in the market, but you try to use them as the materials for other industries, you will hurt other industries, including the jobs.
Yeah. Marina, other questions?
What is their effect of car and house prices?
All right. Do you want to take this one, Stella, or do you prefer me to start?
You start, please.
So as we were saying earlier, the general impact is a decline in economic activity. If tariffs are targeted, then they can have a positive impact on some industries and a negative impact on all the others. The specific questions about cars and houses, actually, these are two very different industries. In the case of cars, this is a sector that is very open to international trade. It's an industry where car parts or cars, as they are being manufactured, they typically move around the world. And some of those final products are also imported and exported. So a tariff is going to have two effects on the car industry. One is going to make supply chains in the industry more complicated, and that adds cost to the system. And then the additional cost on both taxes and on car parts and on cars themselves, if they are imported, is going to cause an increase in the cost of cars. To give you an idea, a typical car manufactured in the US, almost half of their parts are imported, right? So any tax on that is going to then percolate into the price of the car. How much of that is going to be absorbed by the suppliers of those car parts? How much of that is going to be absorbed by the manufacturer of the car? How much is going to be absorbed by the distributors, by the dealerships? How much is going to be passed on to the final consumer? That's a different story. In the case of the price of houses, that's a different story. In the case of housing, especially in California, most of the cost of a house is the land, and land is not imported. It's been here for a while. And then there are imported materials, but there's a big component of labor in construction. So that can have a very different kind of effect on the price of housing.
Yeah, and also, when we talk about a house, someone may ask, yeah, we import cars, or car parts, but we don't import houses, right? We build house here, but don't forget about Dr. Gomez-Arias just mentioned. So it's really the components part, it's the materials, or the steel is a major target for, tariff hit. And also don't forget, consumers, House, you don't have the cash to buy the house. You have to save money, and that take years. And when we talk about the inflation affect your life, when you have to spend your money on the bread and milk and other necessary materials, your saving speed is lower down, and that will affect how much you can pay for the houses as well.
Marina, can you give the microphone to Antonio? He's raising his hand. He has a question. And then I think we have a question coming online.
Just a follow-up question to the car aspect of things. As new cars are affected with the tariffs, you think it also correlates to used vehicles in the sense that as consumers are no longer buying the more expensive, newer vehicles, it tends to affect the demand and supply for the used car market?
Well, new cars and used cars are substitutes, which means the price of both of them can move in different directions depending on demand, right? If you reduce the demand of one, you're going to increase the demand of the other, right? So yes, there's going to be a move of that demand into used cars, which may be more inexpensive. At the same time, it's going to cause also an increase in the price of used cars because there's going to be more demand for them. There was a question coming from the virtual world.
Yes. So they're asking, could tariffs harm the less fortunate by pricing them out of essential items?
Will tariffs price the poorest out of essential items? That's what you said. Stella, do you want to take this one?
Can you clarify that question?
No, I think the question is if the prices of essential items if those prices will raise so much that some of the least advantaged among us will be priced out of the market. And in the margins, yes, there may be some people who may be priced out of the market to the extent that some of the cheapest products that we receive are imported. If you think about clothing, the cheapest clothing tends to be imported, or footwear, or some other necessities. They tend to be imported. Many food products are imported. If those prices go up, yes, they are going to have a disproportionate impact on the less disadvantaged populations.
That's right. And when we talk about the necessary things we need in our life, I think very soon you are going to experience the like a major category of increase very soon. Like when we approach the Christmas, when you buy toys is a big hit in this round of tariff increase. And other necessary things include, I have some data point here just to remind everybody, clothing, you are going to experience that. The tools, you use in your garden, the home appliances, because many of the parts are actually made imported from other countries. And those are the big hit areas. So stock some toys for your kids or for your grandkids now.
In the past,
Conrad, can you get a microphone?
Okay, so in the past, when I was going to school, I learned something about the law of comparative advantage. And that law, if I remember, it stated that the countries or the places that can produce a particular good or service at the lowest cost, let it do that. Whereas, other folks concentrate on what they do best. Mm-hmm. Okay. Just like in sports, if you are very, very good, in a particular, you are 6'7", 6'9", and all that, maybe basketball will give you the competitive advantage. So what happens with that when you are doing tariffs?
Yeah, so you can, so at first sight, it would seem that countries that are less efficient at producing certain products will be crowded out of the market because they cannot compete. However, when you look into it, what matters is not so much absolute advantage, because that's what you were describing. What matters is comparative advantage, and that's the fact that every country is more competitive in some industries than others, even if they are not absolutely the most competitive. In that case, trade can actually benefit all countries if they focus on the areas where they are the most competitive. One example that I used to use in class and probably is not that accurate anymore is cell phones and movies, right? Probably China is cheaper at making both movies and cell phones than the US. However, the US is much better at making movies than making cell phones. So it makes sense for America to produce movies and for China to produce cell phones. And all of us would enjoy better movies and better cell phones, right? Of course, the Chinese movie industry has evolved a lot in the last few years, and maybe that's not that accurate anymore. But I still like my Hollywood movies, right? Does that answer your question, Conrad? Yeah.
I think that's a very good example, Dr. Gomez-Arias just to make. So we all know that, and just let me throw a question to you. Who is the largest exporter in the world? Just a guess. China, right? But however, China is only the largest exporter, like a seller in the world for the manufactured products, industrial consumer products. US still stay in the #1 place, being the largest exporter of services, including, you talk about the movies and the copyrights and, all of those kind of financial services, banking, etc. So in that category, US for years still staying in the #1. So we talk about, yes, comparative advantage or relative advantage. That is the supporters for free trade. They believe we shouldn't put any barriers at all. We should let the country sell and buy from each other freely. Free market, that's what we support, right? So that's the argument. Country, they're going to specialize with something they're really good at. We talk about the Ghana is about the cocoa. We talk about the Korea, it's about the rice. We talk about the US, is about, the pharmaceutical, technology, etc. So each country, they have their specialization.
Yeah, can I have a follow-up, please?
Let's get another question from other viewers, and then we come back to you, Conrad.
Half questions.
What are effective legal and logistical strategies to minimize tariff-related disruptions?
Do you want to cover some of those?
I can start. Sometimes it's not only a matter of how high tariffs are, but how much they change, how much they evolve. Something that many companies and organizations do is import into foreign trade zones or areas where you can actually import products into actually we have one right here at the San Bernardino airport.
Beach. Yeah, right.
Where you can import products into the country tax-free, as long as they remain in that area. You can take them out only when you need them or when you want to, and that's when you pay the tax, and you have certainty that at this time this is the tariff that I'm going to pay. This is when I take them out. You can also engage in manufacturing within those zones, so you can actually engage in transformation of those products, and then the products are the ones that are taxed, and they may be taxed at a lower rate in some cases. Other things that companies do is change how they import certain products and how much value added is produced overseas or in the country. It may be that tariffs on parts are higher than tariffs on the final product. So you import the final product, or vice versa. If the tariffs on the final product are higher than the tariffs on parts, you can import the parts and then assemble just the final product domestically. Tariffs are different in different parts of the world. So The tariffs that the US charges on Chinese products are different from Korea or Japan or Thailand or Vietnam.
It's country of origin.
Right, so companies can move their supply chains, sometimes engage in something that is sort of a gray area, which is transshipment. They send the product to a separate country that has a lower tax rate and then send it to the US, pretending that it comes from that country.
It's a
you
very
know,
typical strategy.
places like Vietnam, for example,
Right.
have engaged in some of that.
Re-
Chinese companies re-exporting through a place like Vietnam. The legality of that is in question sometimes. To what extent
It's quite tricky.
because you get to discussions about how much value added has been incorporated into that product, into that in that transshipment process. In some cases, there has been enough to justify that it's a new product and it has been manufactured in that place. In some other cases, it's just moving a container from one ship to another.
Yeah. So other than Dr. Gomez-Arias talk about, the strategic plan of, how to react to such kind of changes, including we talk about re-exporting, like that's why we see a lot of products actually made in China, but come from Hong Kong. China is the #1 largest exporter, but Hong Kong is the #10 largest exporter in the whole world. You can see the purpose of that. And it also talk about, reshoring. We talk about the foreign trade zone. So before circulating the market, you don't have to pay tax. So you delay the tax paying. And a couple of more practical things are including, when the products move from the port across the border, like you have to file your, claim your classification of the goods and products in the border, in the customs. You make sure you give the accurate information because sometimes it may change how much you have to pay. Like for instance, let me give you an example. The smartwatch with GPS, if you put it in the watch category, it will much higher tariff rate compared with if you put in the electronics, personal electronics, that will be much lower. You make sure your broker, whoever they claim that, you put in the correct category. And also you can search, we have the authority, the federal authority, they deal with such kind of like a tariff and other type of things are they are the U.S. customers and border protection. So they handle all of the tariffs, everything, and you search their programs. They have a different either subsidies or like special programs there. So those are a couple of things you can.
Yeah, and just as background to what Stella was saying, sometimes we talk about tariffs as if it's just one homogeneous thing. In fact, that's thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of tariffs for each country. So each country has a schedule. That schedule has thousands and thousands of lines. So that you have one line for dresses for girls made of woven artificial fabrics.
Right. Materials and what they are.
And which is different from dresses made from other kinds of fabrics.
Right, exactly.
And they can have widely different, you have a line that says, well, this is the tariff to import elephants. This is there's a difference between importing a horse or a pregnant horse. I guess that would be a mare. And those tariffs can be different. And every single product that you can imagine has a line, and that's for every one country.
And
right?
don't forget about the trade agreement. That's another thing we want to touch later, but we want to throw it here. Like the tariff rates are not only about the country of origin, it's also about additional trade agreement. They have sometimes, we are friends. We consider ourselves like the countries, we consider ourselves as friends. we have special discount with each other. So that's why we talk about the USMCA or the previous NAFTA, the North America Trade Agreement, like Mexico, US, and Canada. We're close friends, we're neighbors. We give discount to each other. We lower down our tariff rates nearly 0% of most products. Or like, US, they trade a lot with the South Asian countries, like Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, those places, they give each other some kind of discount price. So also study those. That may give you a different category of tariff rate as well.
Yeah. Any other questions coming from the interwebs?
Yes.
And don't forget Conrad. I think he has another question.
So would tariffs solve the U.S. goods trade deficit?
Will tariffs stop or slow the U.S. trade deficit?
So the most straightforward, people would think yes. I mean, why? What triggered the whole, the tension, the argument, the discussion here is because of the trade deficit, right? So, and that is one of the major justification for why we take some actions here. The trade deficit, let's make an example of US versus China because it's the most tension part. The peak in 2018 reached about $400 billion. And that's why, people concerned what happened here because trade deficit is about the debt, government debt. Trade deficit is about you are too relying on other countries. It's quite risky, right? But however, if we put tariff on that, is that a simple math of, we reduce trade deficit? Maybe in the near term, like a short term, but in the long run, it's a complicated. The whole economy is quite complicated. It's not only about how much we charge, how much we make products more expensive, and so that we can change the whole deficit thing. And you talk a lot about, the strategies, how business react, they remapping, replanning, and there are like other factors.
Yeah.
What do you think?
In a static world, you would think you increase tariffs, you reduce imports, right? And as a consequence, that reduces the deficit. But the world is dynamic and economies are dynamic. So you have two effects. If we increase tariffs, chances are that other countries are going to increase their tariffs on American products. So yes, we're going to reduce imports. We're going to reduce exports too. So it's going to reduce both overall economic activity, and then the end result is a toss-up. Probably is going to reduce the deficit in absolute terms. The long run is a different story because economies adjust, companies adjust, consumers adjust. They change their buying patterns. They change their supply chains. They change how they do things. And probably the American economy is one of the most dynamic and creative and innovative economies in the world. So ultimately, we are all going to adjust to whatever it is that is the new status quo.
Yeah, I agree. Those trade partners, they're not only the exporters to the US, they're also big markets we're looking for. We try to sell our the best products to those markets as well. They have huge population, they have like large land, they need a lot of things. And they need Hollywood movies as well, right?
Yes. Okay, Conrad, you can ask your question again.
Yeah, it's a follow-up because, there are a good number of multinational companies that produce things in these other countries. Right now, we are talking about China or USA or, Canada. Whereas we know, for example, Intel, okay, we know Apple, we know Microsoft, we know all these multinational companies, they go to the place where the labor cost is the cheapest or some materials are available over there, which are not available here, whether, it's lithium, whatever, type of product. Okay, so the question is, why do we talk, when we talk about tariffs, we are talking about tariffs as if it's national states without looking at multinational companies, okay? Those are operating in these other countries, okay, and bringing back on the back on home, to it.
That's a great question, Conrad. One of the things that doesn't appear clearly in the statistics, in the international trade statistics, when you look at them, is the fact that much of what we see in trade is more trade inside companies than trade between countries. So it's General Motors moving products around the world and eventually selling them somewhere. It's Toyota moving parts and products and transmissions and engines and car bodies and then selling them in a particular place. It's pharmaceutical companies moving products around. It's a lot of it is intra-company transactions. And we don't talk a lot about that because that's how many supply chains are being configured. Some of it is internal. I also want to point out that just because a product has a certain brand doesn't mean that it's traded within that brand, right? So if you think about an Apple product, almost nothing in your iPhone is made by Apple. Right? It may be designed by them, it may be conceptualized by them, the supply chain may be coordinated by them, is distributed by them, but very little is actually made by them.
Yes, I agree with Dr. Gomez-Arias. It's really which we don't know is the large companies, they set up the transfer price that actually they do import things, even they have their subsidiaries, they're branching other countries. That's a major part, and that's why like we probably, some of you heard about the news, like right before the April 4th, the Liberation Day, actually a lot of large companies, including Apple, Nike, and many of those, they rushed to ship a lot of vessels, a lot of containers in the US, try to just catch before the deadline.
Yes. Do we have other questions?
How will tariffs affect Inland Empire employment?
Great question, very relevant. Thank you. Okay, yeah, I just tried to catch that one. So I was looking for that kind of question. How that relevant to our life other than, you buy clothes, you buy toys, you buy cars, house, etc. Don't forget, we are in the Inland Empire, and what's the area the economy is based on, the warehousing, logistics, right? It's a major part of our economy. And we're so close to the ports, like two of the largest major US ports are here, LA port and the Long Beach port. And when we see the tariff fluctuation, especially increase a lot, what's the reaction? They slow down the shipment, right? So they don't ship to those, they don't want to hit the tariff. And once we see the slowdown of the traffic in the port, that will affect all of the surrounding businesses, not only about the dock workers, not only about the truckers, but also the warehousing, or even, any businesses that are relying on the port over there. So that will be quite ultimate, other than, like what we can buy as a consumers in the market.
What Stella said. I don't have much to add to it.
How do you know if the correct tariff amount is being passed to the consumer?
That's an excellent question. And it's a tough one. In a way, it's an easy one. You don't know.
Thank you.
Because how much of that additional cost is passed through to the final consumer, it's going to depend on the structure of the whole industry. In some industries, the power is going to be in the importer, and they will be able to put enough pressure on their suppliers, their foreign suppliers, to tell them, look, this is an increase in cost, and I'm going to buy the product once you put it in my factory at this price, and that's it. You will have to absorb these additional costs coming from the tariff.
Sure.
At the other end, there will be industries where the final consumer has absolutely no power, and everything is going to be passed through, and in some cases it's going to be multiplied. The final consumer is going to pay a price that has increased in more than the value of the tax. In most cases, is going to be something somewhere in between. Importers are going to put some pressure on their suppliers, telling them, look, there has been an increase in costs. I just cannot pay as much as I was paying for your product. Can we work something out here? Some importers, some companies will be able to absorb some of those additional costs out of their own profits. And some of that additional tax is going to result in some increase in prices for the final consumers. But how much that is distributed is going to change from one industry to another, depending on how much power the different players in the industry have.
Yes, it's all about your negotiation power. Like it will be totally different if Walmart being one side, or if it's a mom and pop shop or a Amazon seller on that side. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with it.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from the web.
Yes, so it's a two-part question. The first part is, what role are tariffs playing in current inflation trends? And the second is there any evidence that there has been a shift in manufacturing locations for major industries?
You take the first part.
I can take the first part and you take the second part. So far, there hasn't been evidence or very clear evidence of an impact of tariffs on inflation. Among other reasons, because it's not clear what the tariffs are going to be and what they are. They have been, today's what, Tuesday? No, Wednesday. So probably it's different from what it was. This week we just heard that there was an agreement with Indonesia. So it changes so much that it's difficult to tell what is the impact on inflation. There are some early indications that there may be there start to be some impact. The latest reading on inflation was published this week, shows a small increase in inflation in the CPI, although that's not the preferred measure of inflation by the Federal Reserve. But it is not clear yet what that impact has been. Everything indicates that there is going to be an impact on inflation in terms of increasing inflation.
Like the toys, don't forget the toys, right? And in terms of the companies, the manufacturers, how they reallocate, or like what kind of plan, what they do, how to react to such kind of tariff increases, they are actually doing that, and they didn't just do it right now. They have years ago. They have, starting from the first Trump administration, they already realized like some kind of threat here. They already reallocate the resources to that's why we talk about the South Asian countries. They're still quite the emerging stage. Then they're still cheaper than the China right now, or not in the position like China is having a tension with the U.S. They already relocate some of the facilities, some of the resources, some of the activities manufactured in those places like Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, other places, and also Mexico, because Mexico certainly has an advantage. It's close to the U.S. You don't have to ship things that long distance, and also with the USMCA of the discount, special friend discount. So they are actually doing that. But however, again, back to the earlier discussion, it's not a one-day deal. It takes a very long time. And like China joined the WTO in 2001. How long it take for them to become the largest manufacturer in the world? More than 10 years. So it's slow.
Yeah, and especially for big changes, big swings in manufacturing, they take a lot of investment. You have to set up your factory, and setting up a factory is not a matter of, well, we decided today and we start producing on Monday. It can take years, especially in the more advanced industries. When we are talking about semiconductors, well, it takes billions of dollars and years of not only planning, but building, but getting the very sophisticated machinery, training the personnel, etc. It takes years to do something like that.
Very long.
Right. So it takes a long time. And most companies will make that kind of investment only if there is a relatively stable environment where they know that they are going to be able to get the appropriate return on investment for those billions of dollars.
Right. And not only those, the US large Western country companies, they are planning that. Even the manufacturers, in China or in Mexico, they themselves, the vendors, they're actually mapping some kind of remapping their plan as well. That's why we talk about when we talk about the phone, I use phone as an example very often. We all know that the majority of the phones in the past are made by Foxconn in China, and Foxconn themselves as a contractor, as a manufacturer, they themselves reallocated their activities to Vietnam and the other South Asian countries.
Yes, Marina.
How do policymakers choose products and countries to target?
Oh, that's a very sensitive question.
That's a really interesting one. I can tell you the way it used to be. I'm not sure I know exactly how it is being done today, and I cannot say that I can read politicians' minds from any party. So it used to be that you would increase tariffs on countries and industry based on how much they were competing against local industries, right? When there were economic reasons for it. So you would have the semiconductor industry in the US saying, well, we have too many semiconductors being imported from Korea or from China. We have to put a stop to that. That would put pressure on their representatives via the other lobbyists, and then they would target those countries and those industries. For retaliatory measures, when it was a matter of trying to get the other country to change their mind, it used to be that you would choose industries that were closely aligned with politicians in that country, so to put pressure on them. So if you had an issue with, let's say, with India, and you wanted them to change something, you would put pressure on an industry that was big in the hometown of, or was a big donor to one politician or the Minister of Trade, etc., so that their constituents, their mother-in-law would call him, or typically him, and say, hey, what's going on here? We have to change, right? And traditionally, that has worked. Lately, that seems to have changed a lot in terms of how things are identified and how they are being targeted. And I'm not sure there is a clear pattern right now about how that's happening.
I think I agree with, like what you said about like a certain industries is about how much like harm to the domestic industry, because one of the purpose is to protect our industries, right? And there's a very classic theory about infant industry. You want to protect, especially those industries that are still young, and they are very kind of like you try to they're weak and you try to protect them. And that's why because I come from China, like I still remember years ago, the car industry, the automobile industry was one super protected industry for China. They charge as high as 50% or to 100% of the tariff rate on a car, imported car, because the car was too young at that time. And the car is so important for a country. But yes, nowadays it's getting more dynamic now. Like a typical nations, they use the trade. It's a very popular topic in politics. They use trade as a leverage to give pressure to other countries. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's quite tricky. Like when they try to have some social goals, like, you have human rights issue, you have environmental issue, you have maybe even, like other type of things, you try to intellectual property rights. That's another concern, like you have to make sure we all follow the rules if there's a game. So those are all kinds of purposes. And just let me give you some facts about what are the, the target industries now. Agriculture is always industry being protected. Agriculture, we see higher tariff rate, relatively higher than the consumer products, the other industrial products. Steel is a very focal area for tariff. Especially in the U.S. The first reaction is the steel and the aluminum. Those materials are quite like the tariff here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a question from the room.
Right.
Arturo, go ahead.
Thank you.
It's on.
Okay. One of the intended consequences of, according to this administration, of the tariffs would be to, if countries like China or big exporters to the US want to avoid those tariffs, they have a solution. They can come here and make the product here in the US. How realistic is really this scenario in the long term, that countries from all over the world will come and settle here to produce, going back to the golden age of manufacturing in this country? Because I read The Economist, I read Foreign Affairs, I'm subscribed to many economic magazines and journals, and no, I haven't read one article saying that in the long run, the countries will line up to come here and manufacture products. I mean, there are already factories, Toyota factories in the US and in other European companies here in this country, but in the long run, I don't see that happening. How realistic is this expectation?
There are some examples of international companies moving production into the US. When you look at foreign car manufacturers setting shop in the US, that happened mostly during the 80s and 90s, when there were some restrictions to import of cars from, at that point, from Japan, from the European Union. That was the time when Toyota and Nissan and BMW and Mercedes, they set up shop typically in the southern states of the US. In part, so that they could gain easier access to the US, and because there was a manufacturing base, there was a technological base, a labor base in the US to do so. It was relatively straightforward. And that's something that other countries have used, not so much with tariffs, but with other barriers. The growth of the car manufacturing in China has been driven by Volkswagen and General Motors and Renault and by foreign manufacturers. So there are some examples of some of that happening. More recently, or actually currently, TSMC, the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturer, is setting up shop in the US. They are building big fabs in Phoenix. I think they are building 2, 3, 4 fabs in there, in part to retain market access to the US, and in part because they got a lot of money from the federal government to do so. Are companies going to line up to produce in the US? That is quite unlikely, because it requires a really big investment. in many cases. In some industries, it's going to happen. In some others, what is going to happen is that manufacturers are going to move from a country where tariffs are higher to one where they are lower. Recently, I was talking to some people in Vietnam, and they were saying, "This is great, fantastic. You know that they are going to stick one to China. They are going to start producing in Vietnam, right? And that's going to be great for the Vietnamese economy. Probably more of that is going to happen than moving a lot of manufacturing to the US. Some of it is going to happen if tariffs get higher enough that makes those investments worthwhile.
Yeah, those happened in the past, especially we observe, you know, like even nearby, we have the car manufacturer from Japan. So 1990s, 1980s, they start to do something like that here. But I agree with Dr. Gomez-Arias, don't forget the motivation of, that's a very good point. You know, when you are threatened by tariffs, why not move them here? Like we do it here, so close, right? Domestic. But don't forget what are the motivations to manufacture them in those emerging economies and ship them here. It's because of the, you know, the labor laws, environmental regulations, and many other cheaper resources, etc., labor, etc. And when you move them here, it will be significantly increase the cost. You don't have to worry about the tariffs, but you have to worry about the other type of factors, manufacturing factors.
Mm-hmm.
We have an online question.
Okay, go ahead.
Should governments prioritize national industries over free trade?
That's a political decision. That's not a policy decision.
That's debate.
So that is not an answer I'm willing to give.
We can discuss
because
both
there
sides. You know, we always, for the free trade, the globalization, we always have two sides for years, historical. A popular debate there. You know, free trade is about, you know, we're a free economy. That's what we're proud of, right? We don't have this, the invisible hand. It's about supply demand. It's not about government intervention. But on the other side, we talk about those arguments, you know, the infant industry, the national security, the protect domestic, you know, jobs, etc. So it's really on what's your position, right? What you believe, what's your political philosophy, you know, a lot of other factors.
Yeah, it's a matter of
who make decisions as well.
Yeah, it's a matter of trade-offs. What are the appropriate trade-offs? It's a political decision. In theory, a free competitive market is the best possible market out there. Right? In theory, in practice, free markets don't exist. You know, there's always some sort of intervention. There are some inefficiencies in the markets, and so on. So tariffs are one of the tools that governments have to intervene in an economy. They have costs. They are a cost to the economy. They are a cost to the economy as a whole. But they can have some benefits for some areas of that economy. So when you know, one example that many people are using nowadays were the tariffs on steel and aluminum a few years ago. Did they protect those industries and increase employment in those industries? The data have seen suggests that yes, they have increased employment in that industry by about 7,000 or so. Do they have a cost? Yes, they have destroyed another 70,000 jobs in other industries. Right? Is it worth protecting those 7,000 at the expense of other 70,000 that are spread throughout the economy? That's a political decision. Right, that we pay our politicians to make for us.
Right, and in terms of like an overall consequences, is also quite tricky. You know, like it's really about You know, like you talk about, you know, you save jobs here, but you probably lose some sectors over there. And whenever we talk about the trade war, trade tension here, you know, you are on the one side, but the other side, they're not just to sit there and applaud and welcome you for all of the actions you take. You know, there will be retaliation. You attack, they will attack back, they will defend themselves, and that can be escalated. And who eventually got hurt, we don't know. So that's why government, when even they talk about it, they negotiate about those trade agreement and tariff, everything, they're very careful about making sure, you know, like years ago, we talk about the US and the EU, remember, they're like a trade war, like a tension between the two, the Airbus versus Boeing, and becoming like escalated to the farming industries. And the government saying, okay, we have to stop here. We have to sit down and let's talk about that.
We have another question, Marina.
A lot of questions, but unfortunately, this is the last one.
Hmm.
Do tariffs hurt or help domestic workers in the short and long run?
I think we touched base a little bit of that question, right? So I think, like a personal, I think in the short run, the simple logic will be, yes, we increase tariff, we protect our domestic industries, jobs are back, you know, because we force the consumers to buy American, right? But however, in the long run, like we mentioned, some industries, they benefit, especially if you are the workers in those protected industries. But, you know, like you are also get hurt, like the other side, they are going to retaliate. You know, some other sectors might got, you know, attacked. Like, for instance, we talk about this time when the US and China, they have such kind of like tension here, the US impose a lot of, like, they have the Section 301, they impose a lot of additional tax on the Chinese goods, but China, this time, they don't back down. This time they retaliate. They put a heavy tax on a major products US sell to the China, which is soybeans. And that will hurt the soybean industry and the farmers. So it's not like a win for all. It's really about we and the loss.
Yeah, and it depends on how they are designed. You know, there are industries where there's really no domestic manufacturer, right? So you were talking about cacao in Ghana. Okay, there's no domestic cacao manufacturing. We produce chocolate,
right?
But we don't have we don't produce cacao beans.
Right. No.
So a tariff is not going to protect any jobs in the US.
Yeah, you cannot force Iceland to grow, you know, orange there.
Yeah, right. So it depends on how those tariffs are designed and how they are implemented, whether they are actually going to have the impact that is desired. Okay. And with that, we are at time. It's almost 1. It has been fun.
Yeah, it has been very fun. Thank you for all of those questions. And yeah, right. We're very glad, you know, teaching the topics as professors. We really have a lot of interest in the field, and it's very relevant to our life.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you also those of you who have been connecting online, and stay tuned because we will have more conversations, you know, on interesting topics or timely topics. And if any of you has an idea of another conversation we should have, please let us know. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and see you soon.
Thank you, and stay cool, stay calm.